They call it the program. But at Rikers Island, that word doesn't mean rehabilitation. It means control, and the kind of order that comes from fear. If you ever step foot inside Rikers, you don't forget the sound first: metal gates crashing like thunder, boots striking tile floors, voices echoing off concrete. The air is heavy with sweat, disinfectant, and the stale bitterness of confinement. Tucked between the Bronx and Queens, across the East River, Rikers isn't just a jail, it's a world governed by its own laws. And the program was its constitution. It started as an unofficial alliance between correction officers and selected inmates. The idea was simple: keep the chaos under control by empowering those who could control others. In practice, it became something darker. A system where violence was permissioned, loyalty was bought, and silence was survival. On a cold morning in February 2015, an officer named John Morales arrived at the George R. Virno Center, one of Rikers' most volatile units. The tension was different that day, thick and electric. The radios buzzed with unusual chatter about a situation in Mod 4A. Morales had been around long enough to know what that meant: somebody broke the rules of the program. Inside the block, the noise was deafening, inmates shouting from their cells, fists pounding metal doors. At the center of the chaos, a single figure stood motionless. Daryl Stacks Coleman, 26, serving time on an assault charge, had crossed a line even Rikers didn't forgive. Word was, he'd refused to pay protection dues to the program, money that supposedly kept the peace. Two inmates known as kings of the floor were pacing near the phones. They didn't look at Morales when he entered. They didn't have to. Everyone knew who ran 4A, not the staff, not the warden, but the inmates sanctioned by the program to maintain order through intimidation. The officers called them the enforcers. Morales felt the temperature drop the moment he stepped inside. The air was thick, humid from tension. He scanned the cells, his hand resting on the radio mic clipped to his vest. "Where's Coleman?" he asked. No one answered. Just the low hum of the fluorescent light above and the faint scrape of metal against tile. Then came the sound, a metallic clang that traveled through the block like a shockwave. Morales turned sharply toward the back of the tier. A broom handle rolled out from an open shower stall. "Lockdown," he shouted. The officers rushed in, keys rattling, but the scene they found stopped them cold. Coleman sat slumped near the back wall, dazed but alive, his face streaked with fear more than pain. Around him were two inmates, both members of the program's inner circle, staring blankly as if nothing had happened. But this wasn't random violence. It was discipline. A message. The next morning, an internal memo circulated quietly among officers: incident contained. No escalation. Maintain discretion. In Rikers' language, that meant don't talk. Morales knew what that really meant: the program had handled its own business. What unsettled him wasn't the silence of the officers, but how practiced it all felt. As if everyone had played their part in a script written years before. Later that week, he found something strange on his inspection route: a slip of notebook paper shoved under a mop bucket near the staff exit. On it, scrawled in pencil, were 6 words: "The program runs this island now." He should have reported it. He didn't. Not because he was scared, but because he understood. At Rikers, truth didn't keep you safe. It put a target on your back. Over the following days, Morales noticed subtle changes. Shift schedules quietly adjusted. Certain officers reassigned. Inmate groups suddenly calmer. The program wasn't being dismantled, it was being fortified. Each block had its captain, an inmate responsible for managing behavior, collecting information, and keeping outsiders in line. The officers who worked alongside them called it informal cooperation. But behind closed doors, it was something far more corrupt, a deal that blurred the line between law and lawless. And the men who refused to participate, they disappeared. One name kept surfacing: Malik Jefferson, a charismatic inmate rumored to have built the program's first network between multiple Rikers housing units. Some said he'd started as a peacekeeper. Others whispered he was a master manipulator, playing both sides, inmate and officer alike. Morales had never met him. But every time chaos erupted, Tone's name was in the air like static before a storm. The island seemed to revolve around invisible hierarchies, the inmates who ruled the tiers, the officers who looked away, and the administrators pretending it didn't exist. It wasn't about rehabilitation anymore. It was about control. One night, after an incident briefing, Morales overheard two senior officers arguing behind the security desk. "Tone's pushing too far," one said. "If he keeps this up, he'll own the whole block." The other replied quietly, "He already does." The next day, Tone was moved to a different unit. Official paperwork called it reassignment for behavioral monitoring. But within hours, his new block fell silent. In a jail known for constant noise, silence was the loudest warning. That evening, Morales walked through the corridor toward the exit. He passed the wall of security monitors, each screen showing a different angle of the island, cells, hallways, yards. For a moment, one screen flickered, revealing something odd: Tone, sitting calmly in his new cell, writing in a small notebook. He looked straight at the camera, and smiled. The feed cut to black. That night, the program made its next move. And it started with the sound of a door unlocking somewhere deep inside Rikers, a door no one had authorized to open. The first thing anyone learns at Rikers Island is that nothing happens by accident. If a door opens, someone turned the key, even if the records say otherwise. When that unauthorized cell door clicked open in March 2015, Officer John Morales thought it was just another system glitch. Rikers was full of them. But by morning, the atmosphere inside the George R. Virno Center had shifted. Officers spoke in lowered voices, and inmates walked with a confidence that felt rehearsed. Something had changed overnight. Morales' supervisor briefed the morning shift, his tone clipped and artificial. "Cell malfunction in 3B. Contained. Inmate relocated. Keep all comments off radio." But the phrase "off radio" meant one thing: cover-up. Morales spent most of the day on edge. During his rounds, he noticed the same pattern repeating: inmates moving like they had new instructions, guards pretending not to see. Even small details felt wrong: a broom left by the wrong door, security lights dimmed in one corner, cameras mysteriously offline. By noon, everyone in 3B was whispering one name: Tone. No one saw him, but everyone felt his presence. Rumors said he was working on something bigger, something that reached beyond Rikers. Morales didn't want to believe it, but the look in his fellow officers' eyes said they already did. Late that night, Morales stayed past his shift, sitting in a security booth surrounded by monitors. He rewound footage from the malfunction that opened Tone's cell. The screen crackled, lines of static twisting across the image. But for a fraction of a second, just before the feed glitched, he saw it: a hand, reaching into the frame, wearing an officer's glove. Someone had opened that door on purpose. The next morning, Morales filed a quiet inquiry through internal affairs, but it went nowhere. Instead, his supervisor called him into an empty break room. "You're asking the wrong questions," the man said, shutting the door. "The program isn't what you think it is. In Tone, he's not just another inmate." "What is he then?" Morales asked. The supervisor hesitated, then said, "He's the one keeping this place from burning down." That phrase would haunt Morales for months. Because if Tone was keeping the island from chaos, it meant chaos was already at the door. By spring, the program had spread through multiple Rikers housing units. It wasn't just inmate order anymore, it was an economy. Cigarettes, commissary, protection, even phone access flowed through the network Tone built. Officers looked the other way because it worked. Violence dropped. The unit stayed quiet. But beneath that calm, a silent hierarchy was tightening its grip. Morales started noticing coded messages scrawled on walls, a circle inside a triangle, the program's mark. Each time it appeared, a new inmate captain rose in another block. It wasn't random graffiti. It was structure. He couldn't ignore it anymore. He began taking notes in a small, worn ledger, documenting everything: dates, inmate transfers, staff reassignments. The deeper he looked, the clearer it became: the program wasn't surviving in secrecy. It was surviving with permission. One afternoon, Morales was escorting an inmate named Luis Vega, a known go-between for Tone, to the infirmary. Vega was wiry, sharp-eyed, and calm in a way most Rikers inmates weren't. "You think you're running things," Vega said quietly as they walked. "But this place? It's already sold." Morales frowned. "Sold to who?" Vega smirked. "The ones who don't wear uniforms." Before Morales could press, Vega stopped walking. Two correction officers appeared at the hallway's end, officers Morales didn't recognize. One of them nodded toward Vega. "We'll take it from here." Morales froze. They weren't on the roster. But the supervisor later confirmed the handoff. When he reviewed the camera footage, that hallway was mysteriously blank. 2 days later, Vega was gone. Officially, he'd been transferred to another unit. Unofficially, no one could say where. The same week, Morales found another message under his office door: "You can't police a system that polices itself." The message wasn't written in inmate handwriting. It was clean, deliberate, typed. He started to see the program differently after that. It wasn't about inmates controlling the tiers, it was a mechanism that allowed the prison to manage chaos indirectly. A shadow management structure that let Rikers operate under the illusion of order. The invisible warden. That's what he began calling it in his notes. Through the summer, morale among officers dropped. Rumors spread of guards being bribed, blackmailed, or rotated out after asking too many questions. Some simply stopped showing up. Those who stayed played by the unspoken rule: follow the program, not the handbook. The island functioned like a chessboard, every move pre-planned, every conflict choreographed. Fights broke out when they were supposed to. Power shifted when Tone allowed it. Even the disciplinary hearings seemed to follow his rhythm. In late August, a young rookie officer named Daniels came to Morales after night shift, pale and shaking. "They told me to deliver this," Daniels said, holding out a folded sheet of paper. It was a schedule, but not for officers. It was for inmates. Specific names, cell locations, and times marked in precise columns. At the top of the list, written in neat handwriting, approved by T.J. Tone Jefferson. When Morales asked who gave Daniels the paper, the rookie looked terrified. "I don't know. It came through internal mail. But it had command clearance." The more Morales uncovered, the less sense it made. Tone wasn't moving through the system was moving around him. Every order, every reassignment, every camera outage aligned with his transfers. By September, the island was quieter than anyone could remember. No riots. No escapes. Even the usual shouting between cells had died down. For the first time, Rikers seemed peaceful. That should have been a relief. But Morales couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't peace, it was preparation. One night, while reviewing camera feeds from an older server, he found a sequence that hadn't been deleted. It showed Tone's old unit, months before his transfer. He sat at a metal desk surrounded by other inmates, each taking notes as he spoke. The footage was silent, but it looked organized. Structured. Like a meeting. In the corner of the frame, barely visible, stood a correction officer, watching, not interfering. When Morales zoomed in, he froze. The officer wasn't any of his co-workers. It was his supervisor. And taped to the wall behind Tone's group, in bold black marker, were 3 words: "The program lives." The feed ended abruptly, cut off mid-frame. That night, Morales made a decision: he'd take everything to the Department of Investigation. But before he could leave the island, a call came over the radio. "Officer Morales, report to Central Control immediately. Priority 1. When he arrived, the captain handed him a sealed envelope. Inside, a short memo: Effective immediately, transfer to administrative leave, pending internal review. No explanation. No reason. And as he walked out through the gates of Rikers Island, he looked back once, the floodlights glowing across the East River, and realized something chilling. You don't quit Rikers. Rikers quits you. And the program wasn't done with him yet. By the winter of 2016, the East River froze at its edges, and Rikers Island loomed like a shadowed fortress in the mist. From across the bridge, Officer John Morales could still see the faint glow of the watchtower lights. He hadn't been back since his suspension. Officially, he was under investigation for procedural interference. Unofficially, he was being silenced. Morales spent his weeks in a small apartment in the Bronx, reading every public record he could find about Rikers. Lawsuits. Deaths in custody. Oversight reports. Each document was another glimpse into a machine built on control, a place that never stopped running, even when its people broke. Then one evening, his phone buzzed with a block number. A voice he didn't recognize said just 5 words, "They're cleaning up the program." Before he could respond, the line went dead. The next morning, he drove toward the island, parking just outside the staff ferry dock. The air was sharp with cold, the skyline behind him muted under gray clouds. A van of correction officers passed, faces unreadable behind fogged glass. For the first time in months, he noticed something new: relief. Whatever was happening on that island, it was changing. But change at Rikers never came without cost. Through old contacts, Morales learned that Malik Jefferson had been moved again, this time to an isolated wing of the Otis Bantam Correctional Center. Rumors said the Department of Correction was phasing out his influence, dismantling his network piece by piece. Yet the strange part was how quiet it all was. No fights. No riots. No media leaks. Just silence. Silence meant control. And Morales had learned to fear that most. He reached out to an investigative reporter he'd once met through a city council hearing, Angela Reed, who was digging into gang manipulation and staff corruption at Rikers. When he told her about the program, she didn't seem surprised, only cautious. "Everyone's heard of it," she said, scribbling notes in a worn leather pad. "But no one on record will confirm it." Morales leaned forward. "Then maybe it's time someone does." Over the next few weeks, he walked her through everything: the hidden hierarchies, the sanctioned violence, the officers who looked away. He handed over his notes, the coded memos, even the CCTV stills he'd kept. Angela listened quietly, her expression tightening as the picture came together. When she finally spoke, her voice was low. "You realize if this runs, they'll deny everything. And you'll be finished." Morales smiled faintly. "I already am." 3 days before publication, Angela's car was found abandoned in Queens. Her laptop was gone, and the article never aired. The paper called it a tragic disappearance. Morales called it confirmation. That same night, a plain envelope slid under his apartment door. No return address. Inside, a single printed photo: Jefferson, sitting across from a Department of Correction administrator. Both smiling. Both shaking hands. On the back of the photo, written in neat pen, "Control restored. The program continues." Morales stared at it for a long time, the edges shaking in his hands. He thought about burning it, throwing it away, pretending it didn't exist. But something in his gut told him that's exactly what they wanted. Instead, he drove to the one place that still held ghosts: the bridge to Rikers. As he stood at the guard checkpoint, the officer recognized him instantly. "Morales? You're not cleared for entry." "I'm not here to enter," Morales said quietly. "Just to see what's left." He leaned on the railing, watching the island through the fog. New construction cranes towered above the old blocks, their steel frames glowing under floodlights. The city had announced plans to close Rikers by 2027, a new era of reform, they called it. But Morales knew better. You can shut down a building. You can't shut down a system. Behind the concrete and wire, the culture that birthed the program still thrived, invisible, efficient, self-preserving. And for all the promises of reform, the same ghosts remained. As he turned to leave, a voice called from behind. "Officer Morales?" A young correction officer, barely in his 20s, held out a folded paper. "This was left in the mailroom with your name on it. No idea how they got it here." Morales unfolded it. One sentence, typed cleanly across the middle: "Every island needs a warden." No signature. That night, Morales couldn't sleep. He pored over his notes again, every date, every code, every name. He realized something: the same pattern that once controlled Rikers had begun reappearing across other facilities. Similar gangs, same methods, same internal quiet. It wasn't the end of the program. It was the export. Rikers was just the blueprint. He started connecting the dots: Otisville, Sing Sing, Green Haven, all showing new inmate-led stability initiatives. Publicly, they were celebrated as progress. Privately, they followed the same structure Tone built years before. And then, a breaking news headline flashed across his screen: former Rikers inmate Malik Jefferson appointed to City Prison Advisory Council. The headline might as well have said what Morales already knew: the program hadn't died. It had gone legitimate. Tone had become part of the system, the very machine that once confined him. He'd traded the cell for a conference room, the walls for power. The invisible warden now wore a suit. Morales shut off the screen. Outside, the faint hum of the city filled the air: sirens, engines, 1,000 small noises merging into one restless sound. The same sound he remembered from Rikers. The sound of something alive, organized, impossible to kill. He sat by the window, notebook open to the last empty page. In steady handwriting, he wrote one line: "Control never leaves the island. It just changes its uniform." He closed the book, exhaled, and for the first time in years, allowed himself a quiet, bitter smile. Rikers Island would close one day. The buildings would crumble, the gates would rust. But the program, that unspoken code of survival, silence, and power, would find new walls. Because systems like Rikers aren't built of concrete. They're built of people. If you think this story was intense, the next one will leave you speechless. Subscribe for more true crime stories that'll keep you on the edge of your seat.